we go. Welcome to Read Aloud. I'm Idan Simpson, a.k.a. Commie Knoxville, a.k.a. Hammer Dan Sickle Pants. And this is Read Aloud with Idan Simpson. I'm Idan Simpson. I've already said that. Point is, today we will be reading from Marxism and the National Question by Joseph Stalin. They tell me, Dan, don't try to rehabilitate Stalin. To which I reply, yes, I will. What I'd like to do is sort of talk a little bit about Stalin himself first. We'll talk a little bit about some of the context surrounding the book itself, the work, the pamphlet, whatever you want to call it. And it was written in 1913? Hold on. I'm shitting the bed already. Wait for it. 1913. Completed in January while he was living in Vienna. It was first published as a pamphlet, an essay, really. It's regarded as the seminal contribution to Marxist analysis of the nature of nationality. It was later widely published, including in English, around 1935, as part of the topical collection Marxism and the National and Colonial Question. It was published under the name K. Stalin. Of course, you know that's not his real name. It's Yosef Yugashvili. And you know that Stalin translates to steel. He's a man of steel. He's also, I don't know if you know this, he was referred to by many as Lenin's left foot. Did you know that? I did not know that. I thought that was fascinating. Lenin's left foot. Now I'm going to pull up this work here from the, wait for it, from the Marx Engels Lenin Institute, to which I don't know much about, of which I don't know much. And they have this little work called Stalin. Let's talk about him. And this is from chapter 3. The First Russian Revolution ended in defeat. Between the First and Second Revolutions, there intervened a period of 10 years, during which the Bolsheviks worked perseveringly, indefatigably, with heroism and self-sacrifice to organize the masses, to foster in the revolutionary spirit, to guide their struggles, and to prepare the ground for the future victory of the revolution. For Lenin and Stalin, these were years of relentless struggle for the preservation and consolidation of the underground revolutionary party, for the application of the Bolshevik line in the new conditions. They were years of strenuous effort to organize and educate the masses of the working class, and of unusually stubborn conflict with the Tsarist police. The Tsarist authorities sensed in Stalin an outstanding revolutionary, and were at great pains to deprive him of all opportunities of carrying on revolutionary work. Arrest, imprisonment, and exile followed each other in swift succession. Between 1902 and 1913, Stalin was arrested 7 times and exiled 6 times. 5 times he escaped from exile. Badass. Scarcely had the Tsarist authorities convoyed him to a new place of exile, then he would again be at large to resume his work of mustering the revolutionary energies of the masses. His last term of exile was the only one that was not cut short in this way. From that he was released by the Revolution of February 1917. In July 1907 began the Baku period of Stalin's revolutionary career. Can his return from the 5th London, of Congress, I think we have a typo here, of the RSDLP, He left Tiflis Am I saying that right? And on the instructions of the party settled in Baku, the largest industrial area in Transcaucasia, and one of the most important centers of the working class movement in Russia. Here he threw himself into the work of winning the Baku Organization for Lenin's slogans and of rallying the working masses under the banner of Bolshevism. He organized the fight to oust the Mensheviks from the working class districts of Baku, Balakini, Ibat, Chorny Gorod, and Bialy Gorod. I'm sorry if I'm saying these wrong. I'm not really going to try any harder than that. He directed the Bolshevik publications, illegal and legal, including of these names. He directed the campaign in the election to the Third Duma. The Mandate to the Social Democratic Deputies of the Third State Duma, written by Stalin, was adopted at a meeting of representatives of the workers' Curie in Baku on September 22nd. Stalin guided the struggle of the Baku workers. The big campaign he organized in connection with the negotiations for a collective agreement between the oil workers and the operators was a brilliant application of Lenin's policy of flexibly combining illegal and legal activities in the period of reaction. By the way, the RSDLP, folks, is the Russian Social Democratic Party, of which the Bolsheviks at this time were a faction. Baku, where the proletarian struggle seethed, and whence the voice of Stalin's fosterlings, the legal Bolshevik newspapers, reverberated throughout Russia, presented an unusual spectacle amid the gloomy night of the Stolypin reaction. The last of the Mohicans of the mass political strike was Lenin's comment on the heroic struggle of the Baku workers in 1908. I do believe he also he makes this reference in that we just read that. Lenin says this in what the fuck did we just read? He says this in Imperialism. He makes this reference. Around Stalin rallied a sturdy band of tried Bolsheviks and Leninists: Fyolatov, Saratovets, Efimov, Vatsek, Bokov, Maligin, Okay. We did great. Them and others. And finally, he secured the complete triumph of Bolshevism in the Baku Party organization. Sorry, no offense to everyone with these last names. Baku became a stronghold of Bolshevism. Under Stalin's leadership, the Baku proletariat waged a heroic struggle in the front ranks of the Russian revolutionary movement. The Baku period was of major importance in Stalin's life. This is what he himself says of it. 2 years of revolutionary activity among the workers in the oil industry steeled me as a practical fighter and as one of the practical leaders. Contact with advanced workers in Baku, with men like Vatsek and Saratovets, those are easy, on the one hand, and the storm of acute conflicts between the workers and oil owners on the other, first taught me what leading large masses of workers meant. It was in Baku that I thus received my second revolutionary baptism of fire. Fire. On March 25th, 1908, Stalin was arrested and, after spending nearly 8 months in prison, was exiled to Solichegotsk in the province of Vologda for a period of 2 years. But on June 24th, 1909, he escaped. He made an escape and made his way back to Baku to continue his illegal work. He vigorously and unreservedly supported Lenin in his stand against the liquidators and Ostavists. The liquidators being, I think he says later on who they are, the liquidators being Mensheviks and Trotskyites. His historic Letters from the Caucasus, which I've not yet read, appeared in the Central Party press and for the newspaper Bakinsky Proletari. He wrote The Party Crisis and Our Tasks from the party and other articles in which he boldly criticized the state of the party organizations and outlined a plan to put an end to the crisis in the party. In these writings, Stalin subjected the liquidators to withering criticism, using the example of the Tiflis Mensheviks to illustrate the renegacy of the liquidators on questions of program and tactics. He severely condemned the treacherous conduct of the accomplices of Trotskyism and formulated the immediate tasks of the party, to which the Prague Party Conference subsequently gave effort, namely the convocation of a general party conference, the publication of a legal party newspaper, and the formation of an illegal party center to conduct the practical work in Russia. I'm noticing here he's already calling out Trotskyism. This is 1913, and they've already identified this trend within party work, within the Social Democrats, of which the Bolsheviks are like a little offshoot. On March 23rd, 1910, I'm tripping. I'm sorry, I'm tripping. I thought I was reading Stalin. Sorry, this is not Stalin writing this. I'm tripping. Sorry. But I'm sure that they were noticing that trends themselves as well. Sorry. If you're following me. If you're not, who cares? Reading on. On March 23rd, 1910, Stalin was arrested again in Baku. After spending 6 months in prison, was convoyed back to Solvychegodsk. He established contact with Lenin from exile, and towards the end of 1910 wrote him a letter in which he expressed full solidarity with Lenin's tactic of forming a party bloc of all who favored the preservation and consolidation of the illegal proletarian party. Okay, here we go. In the same letter, he castigated the rank unprincipledness of Trotsky. This is 1910. They're calling out Trotsky, and outlined a plan for the organization of party work in Russia. In the latter half of 1911 began the St. Petersburg period of Stalin's revolutionary career. On September 6th, he secretly left Vologda for St. Petersburg. He established contact with the party organization there, organized and gave directions for the fight against the liquidators, again, Mensheviks and Trotskyites, and took measures to rally and strengthen the Bolshevik organizations. He was arrested again September 9th, 1911, and sent back to the Vologda province, whence he again managed to escape in February 1912. Starting to think he had help. Meanwhile, in January 1912, a momentous event had taken place in the life of the party. The Prague Conference, having expelled the Mensheviks from the party, inaugurated a party of a new type, a Leninist party, the Bolshevik Party. Is there an echo in the room? This new type, for the farthest new type, is that a typo? For this new type of party, the Bolsheviks had been working ever since the days of the old Iskra, or spark, working persistently and perseveringly, regardless of all obstacles. The whole history of the fight against the economists, the Mensheviks, the Trotskyites, the Ostavists, and the idealists of all shades, down to the imperio-criticists, had been paving the way for the formation of such a party. Of exclusive and decisive importance in this preparatory work were Lenin's What is to be Done? 1 step forward, 2 steps back. 2 tactics of social democracy in the democratic revolution, and materialism and imperio-criticism. Stalin fought side by side with Lenin in the struggle against innumerable enemies, and was his staunch supporter in the fight for a revolutionary Marxist party, a Bolshevik party. We'll go now to Marxist.com. I can't say that I know much about this organization at all, to be honest, but I'm just going to read this intro to Marxists and the National Question by some guy some time ago. As the capitalist system lurches from one crisis to the next, old contradictions are reemerging. Instability, polarization. Is this a Trotsky? That's so funny. The Trots. Instability, polarization, and huge political shifts are taking place all over the world. As part of this process, unsolved national questions are erupting once more with renewed force around the globe. From Catalonia to Kurdistan to Ireland. And that's sort of interesting they picked Kurdistan. This is 2019. When the contradictions in Palestine perhaps weren't as sharp as they are right now. And it's not just on the national question that these giant shifts are taking place. The emergence of new political movements and formations, from Sanders to Corbyn to Podemos, whom I don't know who that is, reflect the impasse of the system and the fact that the masses, deprived of a party with a clear revolutionary program, are searching for a way out. I think that's good analysis so far. For Marxists, the national question presents one of the most challenging and complex questions, one for which there is no catch-all formula. When addressing this question, our first principle is always the goal of uniting the working class of the whole world to fight for the overthrow of capitalism. I don't know. See, that's where the Trots start doing this idealism thing. Yeah, that's a goal. But why are you saying it's your first principle? Like, where are you pulling that arbitrarily? Our first principle. I don't know. In general, Marxists wish to abolish borders. Yeah, that's the thing. They're calling this their first principle when really it's in general. That's one of our goals. I don't know. Whatever. In general, Marxists wish to abolish borders, not to throw up new ones. And yet, the position of Marxists, developed particularly by Lenin and the Bolsheviks, has been to defend the democratic right of nations to self-determination. They're already confusing states for nations. This is the problem here. Up to and including the point of secession. This can present an apparent contradiction. They're blurring the lines between nations and states. I don't like that. Anyways, this can present an apparent contradiction. After all, do we not want to get rid of all borders? Why then defend the right to establish new ones? They're blurring their lines. I don't think they've read the book. I don't think they've read it and studied it. I'm not going to watch this. All right, that is one issue I have with this. In 1903, a Russian Social Democratic Party, like I mentioned, debated this exact problem. Russia at that time was labeled the prison house of nations because of the horrific oppression of the Ukrainians, Georgians, Belarusians, Lithuanians, Jews, and other national minorities. The Russian Marxists, in opposition to Tsarist oppression, inscribed onto their banner the defense of the right of nations of self-determination. That's one of the things that made those nations not reject the Soviet Revolution when it happened. Because the Soviets were like, we don't want to oppress you. You are your own nation. You have the right to self-determination. You have the right to secede if you want. It was inscribed on their banner in 1903. So 15 years of spreading that message. And then they have their revolution. And then these nations aren't so fucking scared of the communists. Huh. At that time, the stance was opposed by Rosa Luxemburg, dummy, who was waging a fierce struggle against Polish nationalism. And she was having a reactionary moment there, wasn't she? In this debate, Lenin correctly pointed out that the best way to undercut Polish nationalism was precisely for the Russian working class, the working class of the oppressor nation, to declare openly they had no interest in continuing Russian Tsarist national oppression. We don't want to oppress you. For sure, don't forget. I know. The policy of defending the democratic right of oppressed nations to secede was therefore aimed at cementing the unity of the working class against their common enemy. This method was proven 100% correct. Even the Trots have to admit it. Without this policy, the outbreak of Russian Revolution of 1917 would likely have led to various republics breaking from the Soviet Union. You see this? These national movements, yeah, she did have bad analysis on this issue. And she got excoriated by Lenin. Holy moly. His work on the national questions is pretty much directed right at her, right? These national movements would have been looked upon the Bolsheviks with distrust as purely a Russian party, and they would have been right to. But Lenin and the Bolsheviks were right to, make this part of their program early. In other words, the position of Marxists on the national question is approached precisely from the point of view of breaking down national animosity and distrust, thus clearing the decks in order to achieve real international class unity. So this actually brings us back to the struggle against the ACP communists, so-called communists. Right? This is what it's all about. It's about the right of nations to self-determination. They're telling and signaling to oppressed nations in this prison house of nations, the so-called United States. They're telling them that if they were to ever have some sort of ACP revolution, and just relax, if they were to ever have some sort of ACP revolution, American Communist Party revolution, these reactionary white guys, mostly, that the oppressed nations of First Nations, they have reason to distrust this so-called Communist Party, don't they? These are very unlike Lenin. These people are very non-Lenin. These people are more like Tsarists. Okay. Now, I don't think I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to pause there because that's all I wanted to read here. What I do want to do, maybe, is peek at the Wikipedia. What does the Wikipedia have to say about this work before we get into the introduction today? Marxism and the National Question. From Wikipedia, Marxism and the National Question. It's a short work of Marxist theory written by Joseph Stalin in January 1913, living in Vienna. Like I mentioned before, published as a pamphlet, frequently reprinted. The essay by the ethnic Georgian Stalin, he's not Russian, was regarded as a seminal contribution to Marxist analysis of the nature of nationality and helped to establish his reputation as an expert on the topic. He's a Georgian lad. Stalin would later become the first People's Commissar of Nationalities following the victory of the Bolshevik Party in the October Revolution in 1917. This work was really fucking important. And the non-chauvinist Marxists, Bolsheviks, were able to point to this work by Stalin going, hey, look at this. This is our analysis, and it's being presented by a Georgian. He's not a Russian. So if you're not Russian, you don't have anything to fear when it comes time for us to do our revolution. That's the underlying narrative, I guess, or one of them. Though it didn't appear in the various English language editions of Stalin's selected works, which began to appear in 1928, Marxism and the National Question was widely republished from 1935 as part of that topical collection I mentioned, Marxism and the National and Colonial Question. It says here, with his thesis reduced to a single line, Stalin concluded, a nation is a historically constituted, stable community of people, formed on the basis of a common language, territory, economic life, and psychological makeup manifested in a common culture. In defining a nature in this manner, Stalin took on the ideas of Otto Bauer, for whom the ideas of Bauer, I got lost. For whom, Otto Bauer, for whom a nation was primarily a manifestation of character and culture. Lenin opposed the ideas of Bauer and Karl Renner and preferred the theories of Karl Kautsky, which conceived of a nation as territorial. What? Thus defined, Stalin took aim at the notion of national and cultural autonomy, charging that the formulation was but a cloaked form of nationalism and socialist garb. I'm not sure what you're saying, dummy dorko. The nation and the state are not the same thing, but I'm not sure what you're saying. Stalin argued that such an approach would lead to the cultural and economic isolation of primitive nationalities, and that the path forward should be the unification of various nations and nationalities into a unified stream of higher culture. Yep, so some background here. The founders of Marxism, Marx and Engels, had not written much on nationalism. This is what Wikipedia tells us. And not even a definition of the word. Is that true? This led to debates among how to proceed in multinational states like the Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires. Josip Yugashvili, better known by his anglicized party name Joseph Stalin, was an ethnic Georgian intellectual and Marxist revolutionary affiliated with the Bolshevik wing of the RSDLP. Stalin regarded Bolshevik leader Lenin as a role model and intellectual beacon, and the young activist sometimes jokingly was called Lenin's left foot by his Georgian comrades. Stalin did not admire the exiled Lenin from afar, though correspondents, but had even met him personally, with the pair attending the 1907 Congress of the RSDLP in London. From the time he left the seminary, which was one of the only higher educational channels available to Georgian intellectuals at the time, Stalin was a so-called professional revolutionary, a paid employee of the Bolshevik Party organization, dedicated full-time to revolutionary activity. I wish I can get people to pay me to read these books to you guys. Prior to 1910, Yugashvili's main political activity took place in the Transcaucasian region of the Russian Empire, making a home in the Azerbaijani oil city of Baku in 1907, as we discussed previously. Stalin helped organize Marxist study circles and worked as an agitator and journalist working for the Bolshevik Party press. He was a reasonably prolific writer during this period, producing no fewer than 56 articles and leaflets. He also preserved pieces of political correspondence. Despite the mass of his written output, his earliest writing was mainly topical and ephemeral, with only a series of newspaper articles written for the Bolshevik press in opposition to anarchism during the Russian Revolution of 1905, gaining permanence through publication as the pamphlet Anarchism or Socialism. Spoiler alert, it's socialism. This first effort at writing a generalized work of Marxist theory in serial form was incomplete, as it was interrupted early in 1907 by his departure from Tiflis to London for the Bolshevik Congress there, and by his subsequent move to Baku. No additional contribution to theory would be made until the writing of Marxism and the National Question in 1913. Despite the paucity of substantial writing, Stalin was well regarded by the Bolshevik leaders in exile. He was co-opted in absentia to the governing Central Committee of the now independent Bolshevik Party at the 1912 Party Conference held in Copenhagen. Stalin, Yugashvili, now known as Stalin, was at the time named one of the 4 members of a Russian bureau for the day-to-day direction of the activity of the Bolshevik Party within the borders of the Russian Empire by the Emmerich, am I saying that right? The Emmerich Copenhagen Party Conference. That is a good word. That's a $5 word. Checks on the mail. So the actual writing of the work began in 1912 in November when he traveled to Krakow. And I'm probably saying that wrong too. That was then under Austrian rule to confer with Lenin on Bolshevik Party business. Lenin had published an article earlier that same month condemning nationalist fragmentation of the revolutionary movement, holding up as the disintegration of the SDLP, the Social Democratic Party of Austria, into autonomous German, Czech, Polish, Ruthenian? The fuck? Italian and Slovene groupings as a grim example. Lenin feared a comparable shattering of the RSDLP along national lines, and sought to crush the Austro-Marxist slogan of national cultural autonomy. Stalin, as an anti-nationalist Georgian, what? Whatever, this is Wikipedia. As an anti-nationalist Georgian with no fear of ethnic Russian domination of the RSDLP, was seen both as an expert on the current interrelationship of the various nationalities of Transcaucasia and a potent national minority voice in favor of the maintenance of a centralized and unified party organization. Stalin was set on the task of writing a lengthy... What is happening in this writing? He was set on the task of writing a lengthy article for publication in the Bolshevik theoretical monthly Provestchetienie, or Enlightenment, detailing an official position on the matter. Regarding Stalin's assignment to write such an article, Lenin wrote to novelist Maxim Gorky in February of 1913. About nationalism, I fully agree with you that we have to bear down harder. We have here a wonderful Georgian who has undertaken to write a long article for Prosveshchenie. After gathering all of the Austrian and other materials, we will take care of this matter. Stalin began work as early as 1913 in January on Lenin's advice. Stalin settled in Vienna to work on the article, as the city was a focal point for the discussion in socialist circles. Lacking a strong knowledge of German, Stalin read Russian translations of key works and had assistants find material and translate for him. And then we have notes here on the publication of it, and I find very little interesting here, except that it was initially signed. He signed the initial work as K. Stalin. And I'm not sure I understand why he wrote K. Does anyone have any idea? We do have your controversy. Trotsky, a fellow Bolshevik and later opponent of Stalin, would later state that the article was undoubtedly Stalin's most important, rather his one and only theoretical work. And that actually may be accurate. However, he also challenged the authorship of the article. He questioned if he wrote it. So I think that's absurd. And I'm not really going to spend too much more time on that. Okay. And I think that gives us a bit of an introduction to the work. And I hope that you feel that you have a little bit more context before getting into the reading. I think that all helped me. What do you think, chat? We will be reading from the Marxist-Leninist Reading Hub edition. The link can be found in chat. And I'm reading off the website itself, but I do have the text where all my notes are in. We're going to be reading from the introduction today, and I think we'll have time for chapter 1 as well. The introduction loses me a little bit, but that's okay. Who cares? We'll try to figure it out as we go. Let's do the reading. Here we go. And again, in the background, I have some of Lenin's favorite songs and musicians playing. Lenin should be playing Stalin's favorite songs. Is there a Stalin's favorite songs playlist? Insane. You wouldn't believe what's coming up when I type in Stalin into stupid ass Spotify. Lenin was a little artsy fartsy. Maybe I should just let this play. I sort of like the strings and stuff. Okay, here we go. And again, if you're listening to the replay, you won't hear any music. Sorry about that. Let's go. Marxism and the National Question by Joseph Stalin. Again, was originally written in 1913, signed as K. Stalin. Does anyone know? Oh, his nickname was Koba. That's right. Apparently, in addition to, yeah, Lenin's left foot, so that may be where the K came from. And what does Koba mean? Does that mean something? Isn't there like an ebook app or something called Koba? I was wondering. You had a cat? You had a cat you called Little Koba. Oh, I would die. And we begin. Marxism and the National Question lays out the fundamental concepts of self-determination, internationalism, and the Marxist understanding of a nation. Kobo. Oh, Kobo. Okay. Introduction. The period of counter-revolution in Russia brought not only thunder and lightning in its train, but also disillusionment in the movement and lack of faith in common forces. As long as people believed in a bright future, they fought side by side, irrespective of nationality. Common questions first and foremost. But when doubt crept into the people's hearts, they began to depart, each to his own national tent. Let every man count only upon himself. The national question first and foremost. And I'm going to be honest, he's already losing me. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. At the same time, a profound upheaval was taking place in the economic life of the country. I'm not sure what period of counter-revolution he's referring to. Was that after 1905? At the same time, a profound upheaval was taking place in the economic life of the country. The year 1905 had not been in vain. Okay. One more blow had been struck at the survivals of serfdom in the countryside. The series of good harvests which succeeded the famine years and the industrial boom which followed furthered the progress of capitalism. I think the period of counter-revolution you may call forget it. Empire Strikes Back, whatever. All right, we could do better. The series of good harvests which succeeded the famine years and the industrial boom which followed furthered the progress of capitalism. Class differentiation in the countryside, the growth of the towns, the development of trade and means of communication all took a big stride forward. This applied particularly to the border regions, and it could not but hasten the process of economic consolidation of the nationalities of Russia. They were bound to be stirred into movement. Thank you, Rivethead, for this context. 1905, the revolution that led to the establishment of constitutional monarchy. It led to the creation of the Duma Legislative Assembly. Thank you. I'm reminded that I need to reread my history of the Communist Party, the Soviet Union, Bolshevik Party. Short course. That's a good one. They don't really teach us about Russian history in public schools here in the United States. So here again, the constitutional regime, as you were saying, established at that time, also acted in the same direction of awakening the nationalities. Awakening of nationalities. Why didn't this happen before feudalism, right? Lots of questions. The spread of newspapers and of literature generally, a certain freedom of the press and cultural institutions, an increase in the number of national theaters and so forth, all unquestionably helped to strengthen national sentiments. The awakening of nationalities, the strengthening of national sentiments. The Duma, with its election campaign and political groups, gave fresh opportunities for greater activity of the nations and provided a new and wide arena for their mobilization. And the mounting wave of militant nationalism above and the series of repressive measures taken by the powers that be in vengeance on the border regions for their love of freedom evoked an answering wave of nationalism below, which at times took the form of crude chauvinism. The spread of Zionism among the Jews. And yes, he's already calling out Zionism in 1903. And no, I'm not going to get into Stalin. I'm not going to get into that other stuff. We're not going to talk about that today. I'm not going to talk about that today. Excuse me. Again, he says the spread of Zionism among the Jews, the increase of chauvinism in Poland, pan-Islamism among the Tatars, the spread of nationalism among the Armenians, Georgians, and Ukrainians, the general swing of the Philistine towards anti-Semitism. All these are generally known facts. Look at that. He's calling out Zionism and anti-Semitism in the same sentence in 1913. The wave of nationalism swept onwards with increasing force, threatening to engulf the mass of the workers. And the more the movement for emancipation declined, the more plentifully nationalism pushed forth its blossoms. At this time, social democracy, and again, they were social democrats at the time, you know what I mean? But the Bolsheviks were like this little splinter group, okay? Eventually, Stalin would proclaim social democracy as objectively the moderate wing of fascism. I don't think I don't think by this time, 1913, he'd proclaimed that. The Social Democrats had not yet been sort of defeated yet. I think definitely 1917 would solidify that. Okay. For social, again, at this difficult time, social democracy had a high mission: to resist nationalism and to protect the masses from the general epidemic. For social democracy, and social democracy alone, could do this by countering nationalism with the tried weapon of internationalism, with the unity and indivisibility of the class struggle. And the more powerfully the wave of nationalism advanced, the louder had to be the call of social democracy for fraternity and unity among the proletarians of all the nationalities of Russia. And in this connection, particular firmness was demanded of the social democrats of the border regions, who came into direct contact with the nationalist movement. But not all social democrats proved equal to the task, and this applies particularly to the social democrats of the border regions. The Bund, which had previously laid stress on the common tasks, now began to give prominence to its own specific, purely nationalist aims. It went to the length of declaring observance of the Sabbath and recognition of Yiddish a fighting issue in its election campaign. The Bund was followed by the Caucasus, one section of the Caucasian Social Democrats, which, like the rest of the Caucasian Social Democrats, had formally rejected cultural national autonomy, were now making it an immediate demand. This is without mentioning the Conference of the Liquidators, which in a diplomatic way gave its sanction to nationalist vacillations. But from this it follows that the views of Russian social democracy on the national question are not yet clear to all social democrats. It is evident that a serious and comprehensive discussion of the national question is required. Consistent social democrats must work solidly and indefatigably against the fog of nationalism, no matter from what quarter it proceeds. So he's already engaging in ideological struggle against people in his own party, his Social Democratic Party. He's waging ideological struggle against Zionism, chauvinism in Poland, pan-Islamism. And anti-Semitism, which he says the general swing of the Philistine towards anti-Semitism. I love that. Now, he does lose me here in the beginning, the intro, especially these first few paragraphs, but you start getting the gist of what he's getting to. And after you read the first chapter, you'll definitely be on the right track. And I feel like the second chapter, you're like, all right, I get where we're going here. I think we'll read the first chapter today. Do you think we have time for that? I feel like I'm already tired. It's been like an hour. Maybe that should be it. Maybe we'll stop there today. Okay. Well, if you got anything out of that, make sure you like and subscribe. Support the content if you like that. We'll come back next time, which I believe will be tomorrow morning. And we'll get into chapter 1. And if we have time, we'll do chapter 2. And I just think that was enough for one day. That was like one full class. That was like a whole hour. And that was Marxism and the National Question. Gave you an intro to that. Try to lay a little bit of a context and foundation for understanding the author, the context surrounding the work. Just sort of planting some seeds, front-loading us a little bit before we get into the work a little bit more. And then we read the intro, and we all had a good time. All right.